right, good morning. Welcome to our Women's Bible Study. Welcome to our Encouraging Truth series. Today I get to say, Happy New Year! Yay! I can't believe it's 2021 already. First, before we actually get started, if you are watching us from YouTube, please make sure you hit the subscribe button or the like button. Somehow that does weird algorithm things, and then it gets the Bible study out to more people. So if you can do that for us, that would be great if you actually like it. So hopefully you do today. First, if you don't know anything about our ministry, you can go online to womensbiblestudy.com. You can learn everything you want to know about us there. We started this Encouraging Truth series actually, around 39 weeks ago, thinking it would just be a few weeks for the coronavirus, and here we still are. So we decided to keep it going to hopefully encourage you every Monday morning. So that's what's been going on for us. All right, now before we get started, I have to show you one thing. That is this right here, okay? For those of you that have been writing into me and asking me, what is it behind you? Someone thought it was a sandwich. I thought that was cute. It actually is a candle, okay? And it has barbed wire all around it because we live in Arizona, so that's just the way that works. So anyway, that is what is sitting back up here. So now, anyone who wants to know that's what that is. I think it's so cute how people will write in and they'll be like, your candle is a little to the left, your whatever that is, and it's just cute. So one girl said, I really am paying attention to what you're saying, but I really need to know what that is. So that is for you. How's that? All right. What I did for December was pretty much eat my way through the month. If you are watching this and you're like, wow, Lisa looked like she gained a few pounds. That's probably true, okay? Someone put this on her Facebook page, and I don't know why it made me laugh. Here you go. 2 little snowmen. One says, looks like you put on a little weight over the holidays. That's me. Yeah, but it's mostly water. I love that. She also put a little thing on her Facebook page that said this: before I buy a 2021 planner, I would really like to see the trailer first. So I'm like, I think we all would like to see the movie trailer for 2021 before it starts. So today I want to actually talk about something that Jesus said that hopefully will make us have a 2021 and have it a really, really great year. Because I think for most of us, we're like, bye-bye to 2020. We're just thankful that it's in our rearview mirror. And we have this like hopeful anticipation that 2021 is going to be so much better. And I think we look at it like, well, as of now, as of today, we don't think there's going to be any more elections. But after the weird year last year, heck, there could be a whole new election. Like, we have no idea. I think we're hopeful this year that there's not going to be any new pandemic. That's kind of what we're anticipating. My hopefulness goes to, I'm tired of wearing masks. All right, so I'm hopeful that this year we can go back to not wearing masks. So that's my hope for 2021. But I really hope that we go back to where we were in March of 2020 before any of this even started. Here's what I want to say today is that even if it doesn't, here's our encouraging truth number 39 for today. We can adapt to new situations and do things different and still have joy. And I think that's what I learned from this whole last year. Now, for us with Bible study, before March of 2020, for years and years and years that we've been doing Bible study, we meet every Wednesday morning at Rio Vista Rec Center. It's kind of like our home base. That's where we videotape all of our stuff, and then it goes out onto YouTube and Roku and apps and all that kind of stuff. Women come, they have bagels and donuts, and it's kind of a fun time to get together. But every March we take 1 week off for spring break. And we did it that year, or this last 2020, and we just finished our End Times conference with Joel Richardson. We were in the middle of a series on the parables of Jesus. And it was just, we had no thought that it would be any different than any other year. So we said goodbye, see you in 2 weeks, and that was our plan. But unbeknownst to all of us, it would be almost a year. And we still don't even know when we're going back there, before we would ever get back to Rio and have life go back to the way we thought it would. All because of the coronavirus, this crazy virus that just showed up. And for us and for you and for Bible study and for everything in the world, basically everything just came to a screeching halt. And we began to see that everything was going to start changing, especially our ministry. And I don't know, maybe, hopefully it'll go back to where it was before March of 2020. But what happened is we realized we would become more of an online ministry. And people would be watching us through YouTube or on Roku, or they'd download our apps, or they would listen through Spotify or iTunes podcasting. Like, it wasn't like an in-person thing like it had always been. It seemed to be now that it would be more of an online thing instead of an in-person thing. So 2020 just threw us for a complete loop because it was completely different than what we'd ever expected to happen. It never happened before. So here is what I learned about this whole year. Here's what I came to the conclusion of, is that regardless of if it's 2020 or 2021 or actually 2030, here's what I learned about life. Life is all about change. It just is. It doesn't stand still. I mean, think about it. Babies are born, then they go to school, and then they graduate, and then they go off to college, and then they leave home, and then you're empty nesters, and then they get married, and then you're grandparents. It just goes on. It's just constantly moving. And those are just normal changes. But then there's those changes that we don't expect, and we're just so shocked when they happen. Like, maybe you got laid off from your job. Maybe you got sick. Maybe you got in an accident. Maybe your spouse left you. Maybe the coronavirus hit. I mean, just things that are just so random that we're like, I don't even know where this even came from. And so what I want to talk about this morning and encourage you is, how do I respond when my life changes? Like, because 2021 is going to be a new year, but even though it's going to be a new year, there's going to be changes regardless of what year it is. There's always going to be something that's going to change. Now, my hope for this year is that we can look at this year with anticipation. The anticipation that says this: God, I know you're going to do something. I know you're going to do something in my life this year. Now, maybe different, possibly scary, but new. Something new. And hopefully, God, in the process that all of these changes happen, you know what? This is what I hope. I hope He will change us. I hope He will change me. And if we let Him, He will change us for good. For me this last year, the good for me is I learned to trust Him more. I learned to surrender more. Now, let's think about this. January 1st, last year, 2020. I think we all woke up and we were hopeful for this really super awesome new year. At the time, the economy was great. People were back to work. We felt safe. The military was one of the best in the whole entire world. And kind of we could just relax, soak it all in, and we had no idea what was coming. But over the last 10 months when the country shut down, I learned a lot about myself. And I learned a lot about what God needed to change in me. When we first started, we started the whole 15 days, slow the spread quarantine. It was right, we were told we couldn't come back to Bible study for at least 15 days. And honestly, I was a wreck. I was mad, I was grumpy, I was irritable. I was just like, I just want my life to go back the way it was. Because for me, I used to have my own time. Like, Rob would get up, he would leave in the morning before 6 a.m. to go to work. Dusty would get up an hour or so later, then he would go off to school. And I would have the whole house to myself to study, to work on Bible study stuff, to get things ready for our Wednesday Bible studies. And it was quiet. And then suddenly in one day, everything changes. And I didn't like it. But you know what I learned? I learned this. I learned how to stay home with Rob, my husband, for those of you that don't know him, living with him 24/7, all the while taking two opposing views of the coronavirus. He was a little more concerned about it. I was a lot less concerned about it. We learned to live together, love each other, amidst disagreeing over face masks and hand sanitizer. I learned too that my life was always wrapped up around Wednesday mornings. Each week it was the same thing every week. Constantly, I've got to get a lesson done. I've got to put it together. I've got to do all the handouts. I have to copy them and then staple them and then get ready and then be at Rio Vista at 6 a.m. in the morning. And it was just this routine. But what I learned when God changes our plans, just like he changed my plans, is what our encouraging Truth 39 is that we really can adapt to new situations and do things different and still have joy. See, I watched this whole thing come to fruition when we watched our kids. One of our kids travels about 200 days a year. He loves it. That's just what he's always done. But when he got quarantined, suddenly he was faced with, I'm home with my kids and my wife and I can't go travel. And now he could stay home. He couldn't before, but now he could. And I'm telling you what, he learned to go ride bikes with his family. He learned to be with them, play games with them, do whatever. Like it was a completely different thing, but he learned how to enjoy it. He learned how to adapt to a new situation and be joyful. I watched as a lot of our kids' marriages actually grew stronger. And what happened is they were forced to be together and they were forced to work together. And now, 10 months later, like if their work says, hey, you need to come back and physically be at the office, they're sad. They don't want to do that. Like they really, really learned how to love being together and being home. I think it's cute. My one son's like, I just love getting up and making my girls breakfast in the morning. And I thought that was kind of cute. But even watching all the good things, I still kind of clung to the fact that I just want my life to go back to normal. But then something really weird happened, and it was this. I actually started enjoying my new normal. And I realized that during these 10 months, I changed. I stopped feeling annoyed and grumpy. I stopped waiting for things to change. I stopped calling Rio going, have you heard anything? When are we coming back? I stopped whining that maybe Bible study would never look like it did before. And I began to understand the problem because all my life, it was like my life was a train on this one train track. And every week I would stop at the same stops and do the same things. It would always be the same scenery. But then one day, coronavirus, my train got shifted onto a new track. And now there's different stops and different scenery. And the train keeps going, but everything I see now is different. But in my life, oddly enough, different became really good. Because I realized this, when life changes, God is always up to something. And I learned, for me, it was to trust him more. To trust him, to learn to be content with where I am. And I learned that over these last 10 months. So I'll give you a couple things that I think we all learned from 2020. Here's the first one. We made it. We made it. Like we made it into 2021. That's kind of a great feat. Here's what I say. We made it through the quarantine. And like I said, I learned a lot about myself during this quarantine. And I learned that what I never had time to do before, which was to sit back and take stock of my own life and say, all right, what needs to change in you, Lisa? Because I was always busy, always running, always doing stuff. I could actually sit back and say, oh, you probably need to change a few things in your life. Because for me, I used to be busy. I would work on Bible study, I would go to lunch with friends, I would make copies, I would staple, I would do those things. But now I had all this extra time on my hands. And here's what I learned about me. I learned that I'm kind of a brat. That's kind of what I learned. And I learned that God needed to change me. And that was the good part that came out of 2020. Here's the second thing. We made it through the elections. And you know what I did? I learned a lot about myself through the elections. And what I learned is that I really, really trust my feelings a lot more than I trusted God. And I knew that needed to change. And I learned that from the election because I would see my mood swings go depending on what the news told me. If it looked like my guy would win, I'd be like, yay, I'd be all excited. If I thought he might be losing, I was very, very discouraged. And I realized how much I put my trust in circumstances instead of God. But this is how I knew that God had changed me over this last year. At the beginning of December, we were really excited to start back on January 6th. That was the plan. Rio said, yes, you can come back. So we were all excited for that. But suddenly we got this new rise in COVID cases in Arizona. So Rob's at Costco, and there's this nurse in line, and they start up a conversation. And she says, you know what, the governor's about ready to shut everything down again and for another quarantine. And she says, you know, it's not out there yet, but it will be soon. So Rob comes home and tells me that. Now, here's my response. Nothing like it was 9 months ago or 10 months before. My first thought was, well, probably fake news because we see a lot of that. But my second thought was, you know what? If it's a shutdown again, it's okay. We've done it before. We've been here before. We can do it again. Because what I learned from this year is life is always changing. It just is. And we can be joyful in the midst of it. So we need to be encouraged for that as we enter 2021. And here's what I realized. You and I, as followers of Jesus, we need to be the ones dispensing that hope to the people around us, that things are going to be okay. So we need to be encouraged by that in 2021. And we need to be the ones, this is what I realized, we need to be the ones dispensing out hope to all the people that are around us. Hope of this, that God is always doing something, and that we can trust that He knows what He is doing. Because as followers of Jesus, it's our job to be a light into this very, very dark world. Because if we don't, then we become like Martin Luther, the great reformer, who went through very, very dark seasons of depression. Understandably, the Pope was out to kill him. His friends were disowning him for his stance that he took. His cause was languishing. He became very, very discouraged and sunk very, very low. And one day, his wife came downstairs dressed all in black. She put on her funeral clothes. He looked at her and he said, "Who died?" And she said, "God did." And he was so angry, he said, "Who in the world convinced you of such a lie?" And she said, "You did. This is why. By the way you've been acting, the worry, the fear, the discouragement," she said, "I assumed that God must have died." I thought that was great. Because if we can't be the ones that are joyful in 2021, no matter what happens in this world, no matter what happens with coronavirus, or no matter what happens with the election or non-election, or if there's another one, or if Biden gets in, or if Trump gets in, we still at this particular point of videotaping this, we don't know. But the bottom line is that we can have a really, really good year if we can dispense out hope to people that God really does know what He's doing, regardless of how it turns out. Because Jesus in His Word tells us how to do that. And this is what He says. You need to stop worrying. Stop worrying. Worry is a choice. I can choose to worry. Am I going to get sick? Am I going to get the coronavirus? Am I going to lose my job? What if we don't have enough money? I can choose to worry about my kids, my grandkids. Are they going to be safe? What if, my granddaughter drives? Oh my gosh, what if she gets in a car accident? See, I can worry about things like that. Or I can stop and I can make a decision that says this, you know what? I am going to focus on God and not what I'm worried about. I'm going to pray about my concerns. I'm going to trust that God will take care of those things that I find myself worrying about. And here is what I learned. I learned that I had to keep the things that help me focus on God in front of me. I had to learn, I'm going to say it again, keep the things that help me focus on God in front of me. And I learned this with the election because all it was news. Like I said, I never watched the news. Like we would watch one news program in the afternoon and that was it. But I would watch the news, I'd turn it on in the morning when I woke up. And then I'd turn it on when I'm walking on the treadmill. And then I'd turn it on in my car. And then I'd turn it on at night. And honestly, my brain was so filled with news that I was a mess. And I was constantly worried about everything, the economy, taxes. What happens if our freedoms as Christians get taken away? But I realized that I was focusing on the wrong thing. I was focusing on the news. And my focus was, because my focus was on the news, I was putting my trust that they were telling me what was going to happen, and that was how I would get my mood swings. But instead, I should have been focused on God. God who could do anything with the election. If he wants Biden to win, he's going to make sure it's going to happen. If he wants Trump to win, he's going to make sure it's going to happen. Like, I needed to focus on a really big God. Because my worry showed up because I was spending time looking for my answers here, when in fact I should have been looking here. I should have been looking in the Bible for my answers. And I realized that I was spending more time focusing on the news instead of focusing on God. One morning I was kind of a mess. I said to go walk on the treadmill. But instead of turning on the news, I turned on a sermon. I found a YouTube sermon. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to listen to something that will impart God stuff into my life. And you know what happened? Suddenly, I had peace again. Because I was listening to someone who reminded me, you know what? God is still in control. God parted the Red Sea. He can change anything. He can change an election if he needs to. God knows what he's doing, no matter who wins. You need to start focusing on that, Lisa, and stop focusing on, well, I don't know what's going to happen. There's always a bigger picture than what I see. I started hearing and being reminded that, remember, like Jesus rose from the dead. God rose Jesus from the dead. If he can do that, I am pretty sure that he can do anything. And see, what we have to remember is that there's an end game to this whole earth. And Jesus is going to come back and return and rule and reign on this earth. And so if we know that's the end game, then what if God is changing presidents to work towards ushering in that event? Or what if God were doing something miraculous to show people that, no, he wants to keep the same president in, but he's going to show us miraculously how he can get that done? See, for me, I had to put God back in the picture. And when I started putting God back in the picture, you know what happened? My worry went away. And I realized who it was that I was hanging out with. I was hanging out with news anchors, and they were filling my mind with fear and anxiety. And I started thinking, if you are hanging around people that are always negative, and they're always telling you, everything looks bleak, America's going to hell with a handbasket, we're all going to lose our homes and jobs, and China's going to take over our country, and oh my gosh, we're all going to go to war. We just need to never get out of bed if that's the kind of people we're listening to. But you know what? If that's what we're hearing, we need to stop. And we need to start listening to messages about God. We need to spend less time listening to negative friends and more time listening to people that will impart the good news of what the Bible says into our brains. Here's what Jesus says in Matthew 6:25. Therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more important than food, and the body more important than clothes? Look at the birds of the air. They don't sow or reap or store away in the barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they? I love that. It's like God's saying, Jesus is saying, if God is your heavenly Father, if he cares about the birds, well, surely he's going to care about you. What in the world are you worried about? He's going to take care of you no matter what happens in this world. So here's what I say. If your guy doesn't win the election, you lose your job, have to pay more taxes, God's like, you are my children. You are so valuable to me. You need to relax. And then Jesus goes on to say this in verse 27. Who of you by worrying can add a single hour to his life? See, was me worrying about the election and who was going to win going to change anything? See, whatever you and I are worried about is usually totally out of our control. And the question is, was that hurting me or helping me? And I would say it was totally hurting me. And I think that Jesus makes it clear about this. Worry comes down to this. Who or what are we seeking? What are we seeking? Are we seeking a president or a government that's going to make things better for us? Are we seeking comfort, happiness, security, my way? And see, when those things don't happen, we begin to worry. And Jesus said this in verse 33. Here's the answer. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. I think we worry because we're seeking the wrong things. Jesus says in order to stop worrying, you need to start seeking him. Not a president, not seeking a spouse, not seeking a job, not money, but him and his kingdom. In other words, we need to seek the things that are important to him, which means we might need to get our focus off of ourselves, off of what I want, and start thinking about, God, okay, we're in the midst of this pandemic. What can I do to serve you? What can I do to serve you here on earth while we're here? What can I do during this time? Now, do I care about the elections of my kids and grandkids and our business? And the answer is absolutely. But care and worry are really two different things. I do care, but instead of worry, I seek God and I pray. And I pray for what I'm concerned for. I pray for, God, who do you need to be president? I ask him, I seek him, because I've learned to trust him. I don't have to worry if I'm trusting him. So in order to have a good 2021, regardless of what happens this year, here's what I say we have to do. We have to spend more time being God-focused, and we need to take one day at a time. Jesus said this in verse 34, therefore do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. So much of our worry comes with, well, what if? What if I get fired? What if my husband leaves me? What if I can't pay this bill? What if my child gets sick? Like, what if? And you add your own 100 worries to that list. But Jesus says, which I think is a really good key for 2021, take one day at a time. If you can't pay that bill that just came in and you know it, you wake up and instead of worrying about the bill, you start off in prayer. God, I'm going to focus on today. You know this bill is due in 2 weeks. I don't have the money. But God, would you step in and do something? Would you give me a part-time job or bring along someone that gives me a big tip as I'm an Uber driver? Like, God, I'm trusting you to bring along the funds that need to. I'm going to do my part, go work, do what I can, but I'm going to trust you and focus on you. If you're worried about your husband getting ready to leave you, you wake up and instead of worrying about all the things that could happen, you stop and say, God, I'm focusing on you today. You know what I need. You know what we need financially, emotionally. God, I'm trusting you to give me the wisdom, to give us and me and the kids everything we need. See, worry shows up because we can't see the future. And somehow we think worry will help, but we know it really doesn't. So here you go. For 2021, as the new year begins, let's take one day at a time. Let's wake up and focus on this particular 24-hour period. Let's wake up, focus our mind on God. Pick up your Bible. Pick it up, read it, start reading it, focusing on the things of God. Listen to a sermon. Refocus. Change your perspective back to what God is doing in your life, what God is doing in this world, and move from this outward, what I see around me, the news and all the craziness, and start looking upward. Remembering that God is so big and powerful and he can do anything. And knowing this, we can have a good 2021, if we remember that. And we can be joyful regardless of what changes in our life for this new year. Happy New Year! Have a really good week.